The Honourable Member Mike Sabin.
Thank you, sir. I'm glad to be able to take an opportunity to rebut some of the comments that Trevor Mallard has made, and I'll give the House an appreciation of what happened. So I took over as a new chairperson of the committee. I went to the member because he held that portfolio spokesmanship, explained to him about the truncated nature of the matter from this point, because this legislation clearly needs to pass before the end of this sitting year, and said to him, was there any concerns or anything he wanted to bring to my attention, and he gave me a range of sporting bodies that he said it would be good for these people to be approached. At that stage, when I spoke to the member Trevor Mallard, he told me that he didn't know how long it had been open for submissions, if it was open for submissions. At that point, it had been open for submissions for some 3.5 months, sir. So I took the names of those organisations, instructed the clerk to make contact. I also spoke to the officials about who they had been in contact with. As a result of putting out the requests to those people and a number of others, actually, sir, one further submitter come forward and said that they wanted to make a submission. When I spoke to the officials on that, they advised that as a result of many months of consultation related to the sports codes of conduct work and the work that's actually been going on in behind this, and I think the Honourable Member makes a very good point about the fact that there has to be alignment with codes of conduct with this legislation, because otherwise you can get into a Mickey Duck situation where the codes of conduct actually undermine what this legislation is setting out to do. But sir, in checking with officials in terms of their level of engagement and putting out a call to those additional groups and some others, I might add, sir, to see whether or not they wanted to make submissions, it was quite clear that they had been involved in a heavy consultation and they had no matters to raise with the committee. Now, I'm not sure if I'm supposed to go and force them into the committee to make some conversation. I'm sure that if the member felt they had some valuable contribution to make in terms of ensuring that the process to align the codes of conduct and codes of ethics that sporting codes are working on, that the member would actually go and speak to them regardless of the select committee process. Well then, Mr Mallard, why didn't they want to come along to the committee?
Because I saw them afterwards, because you shut them out.
Well, no, that's just simply not the case, Mr Mallard. That's simply not the case. As a new chairperson, I went directly at the first person I spoke to was Mr Mallard. He's come into this House and misrepresented the exact situation. I am a man of my word. I covered that off. Well, that is absolutely the case, Mr Mallard. What you are saying doesn't line up with what I did, and I also spoke to you and advised you subsequently that they had come back and said that admittedly via the officials, that they didn't want no submissions. It was not at all related to the fact that the officials didn't want them to come. They never said that. They never said that at all. And Mr Goff was on the committee at the time and he will vouch for that. So, but I'll come back to the bill. Obviously with the upcoming World Cup, this is important. And I do accept what the Honourable Member Trevor Mallard says about the fact that we're now pressed up against Christmas time and this bill needs to be passed. And in a perfect world, sir, we'd be in a position where all the legislation that we want to have in front of the House is passed through in a timely manner and there wouldn't be delay. But sir, I'd have to say that members on the other side of the House will stand there and occupy as much time as they can with hot breath, not adding value to anything, to try and stall the very legislation that they then turn around and say should have been happening faster. Now, I'm not privy to why it was that this legislation hasn't got to the point where it is, sir, but I accept that it's important legislation and it must pass. But it's also clear that the submission process was open for 3.5 months. It is a very simple piece of legislation, and I actually think while it's an important piece of legislation, the most important work that's going on alongside it is the work of Sports New Zealand with the governing bodies of sporting organisations to ensure that the codes of ethics, the codes of conduct, the rules are actually that we get people onto, no pun intended, sir, a level playing field, because I think it's fair to say that hasn't been the case. It's also the case, sir, that this bill is relatively narrow in that it doesn't set out to criminalise behaviour that would, I guess we just consider to be cheating. And I'm reminded of the famous line-out episode of one Andy Hayden, although I'm not sure he would accept that it was cheating. But sir, if you get into a situation, not you, sir, but if a sporting athlete gets into a situation where they're collapsing a scrum, or whether they're taking a fall, a dive or what have you, to influence an outcome that may give them a better position in the following round or so on and so forth, sir. Clearly that is gamesmanship, arguably something that shouldn't happen, but it does. But sir, when someone does that and there's a pecuniary advantage, or they bet on the outcome, secondly...
What about a win bonus?
A what, sorry?
What about a win bonus?
Well, I guess that falls into a similar category, and it's quite clear. No, it does. It does. It's quite clear. It's quite clear that this legislation doesn't set out to criminalise the sort of behaviour that could result in people dropping a game to put themselves in a better round to get better draw to win a bonus. And that's the challenge, is if you look at this and it's considered world-leading legislation, it is a very complex area, because the depth and layers of particularly match fixing are quite substantive. So, but this is very clear, and it's very narrow in its intentions, and it's about a bet, a pecuniary advantage, and someone trying to leverage an outcome of a match simply for that, sir. And regrettably, while the honourable member is obviously concerned about this select committee process, I can put my hand on my heart, sir, and say that I was setting out to achieve exactly what he wants to, because actually this is not only important for match fixing, it's actually important for sporting codes to ensure that the sort of gamesmanship and nonsense that we can sometimes see is eliminated as part of this. Not to say that it's criminalised, sir, but it's important that all sports play in a fair and upfront manner. Sir, I commend the bill.